Hi, Graham Chatley from Changing Perceptions again. Now, I was fairly scathing the other day about Tom Bennett's Rebooting Behaviour after lockdown document, mainly because I just don't think a behaviourist approach is what's needed when we come back to school. There's very little in there about all of the things the children are going to experience and why they are likely to be struggling. I'm not even going to use the word misbehaving because that sort of implies choice. But I just think it's really missing the mark. And, you know, the irony that it was sort of released the week after the VE Day celebrations really isn't sort of lost on me. I think it was probably recycled from a document that was released after the actual VE Day. But it's just missing the mark on lots of respects. And the head teachers that I speak to and stuff, their real concern is around pupil well-being. They're not focusing on learning as such at this point. They just want to get, when they do get the children back in, they want to get them back to a level where they're in a position to be learning rather than going straight in there all guns blazing. So, you know, some of it's fine. I've no problem with systems. You know, routines are important. You know, we do need to get children back into that area. But if we think that that's the be all and end all, when we go back, then we're setting ourselves up for real problems. And you know, at best, it's just not a very good document. At worst, it's potentially really, really dangerous. So I'm going to sort of talk through it and then sort of add my bits in there. And then at the end, I'm going to give you what I think we should be doing when the children return. So I'm going to just switch to a little slideshow. Just give me a second. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, the first thing that sort of the document talks about is that it talks about the fact that better behaviour is the beginning of everything. Now, you know, I've been arguing for a long time that, you know, behaviour is so important and something that we've got to get right in classes if we want the other stuff to follow. You know, initial teacher training, and we do so much stuff on assessment and various different things. But if we don't get behaviour right, then we haven't got anything to assess. But it's much more than that. And, you know, if we're looking at better behaviour being the beginning of it, well, before better behaviour, the behaviour is driven by how we feel. So therefore, feelings must come before behaviour. And then the way that we feel is a result of our experiences. So experiences must come before the behaviour as well. And then it's our relationships that shape our feelings. So where we need to be looking at the beginning is we need to be looking at the relationships. And the relationships that we've had are going to have been damaged to some respect through no fault of our own, but we're not looking at it from our perspective. We're looking at the perspective of the children. So we need to really be sort of looking at how do we rebuild those relationships that have been damaged as we've gone. So the final thing that he sort of said in his introduction is that behaviour is not an afterthought. But if we are only looking at behaviour and we're not actually looking at what is causing the behaviour, and we're waiting for children to start the misbehaviour, then it is an afterthought. You know, there's no forethought there as to, oh, well, we need to understand what's behind this. So without that, then we are setting ourselves up on the back foot because we're waiting for things to go wrong before we actually do anything about it. And we've got to be better than that. So again, sort of the term misbehave, it kind of implies a choice, which I kind of disagree with, and I'll explain in a minute. But Mr. Bennett decided to choose 5 reasons why children misbehave. Now, the first one is that children have forgotten how to school. You know, yeah, children have probably not been in a strict routine like they would have been at school and stuff, and we may need to re-embed all of those things. But the idea that is a reason for misbehaviour, I'm not too sure about, and we'll look at that again in a second. The other one I found really patronising, and that's sort of talking about how teachers have forgotten how to teach. As far as I'm aware, teachers have been teaching all the way through in different ways and different formats and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit different when we come back, but to imply that teachers are going to cause misbehaviour, I take issue with that, and I'm sure a lot of teachers do as well. And then we start with the hygiene stuff, and our first mention of hygiene is there. Now, children desperate to go back to school might be a little bit forgetful. You know, they might have an impulse to hug the friend, or they might forget that they aren't supposed to touch the face, or something like that. For me, that's not misbehaviour. And if we're going to see that as misbehaviour, and we're going to give out sanctions and stuff for children who do that, then we really are looking at some problems down the line. Point number 4 was basically young children, early years children, touching things and picking their noses and not having perfect hygiene and things like that. They're 5 and 6 year olds. If we're going to say 5 and 6 year olds are misbehaving for being 5 and 6 year olds, then I just can't see the logic there. I really can't. And then number 5 is if we don't train them to behave, they might break this virological etiquette. Now, when did we start training children? You know, I thought we were teachers. You know, it's kind of again, I'm struggling with that one. Now, of all the things to choose, they would not have been the ones that I would have chosen, and I certainly wouldn't have chosen the word misbehave. What we might have is a lot of children who are coming to school dysregulated, and they might have really good reason to be dysregulated, because Tom says at the beginning that we've no reason to expect all children to have suffered trauma and loss. Well, we've got every reason to expect that. You know, whether it's a serious bereavement or loss or trauma, it won't be every child. But every child has lost something, just like every adult has lost something in this process. They may have lost their safety. They've definitely lost their friends. They've lost the trusted adults that they had at school. And then there will be those children who are coming back who have actually suffered a bereavement. And that whether they do misbehave when they come back, they've all suffered, and they're all going to be dysregulated in one respect or another. And that might not come out as behaviour. They might be struggling with that all the way through, which can cause us further problems down the line. Other things that we've got to take into account is they're going to be anxious about coming back. It's been a long break. They're going to be worried about all sorts of different things when they come back. We're going to have anxious children walking in the door. It's not going to be the same, especially for younger ones. You know, some of the classrooms that I've seen that they've in an attempt to make things safe, they're not school. A reception year 1 area that doesn't have any colour, that doesn't have any toys, that doesn't have any soft play, doesn't have any sand, that's not school for these children. So all of the changes, plus all the extra routines, plus all the extra stuff about hygiene, school is not going to be the school that they remember, and that's going to cause a lot of dysregulation in the children that are coming back. They're going to be staff that are anxious. We all know how staff are currently feeling about the prospect of going back. They desperately want it to happen, but they're worried. and that is going to be impacting on the children, and they're going to pick up on that as we go. And then you've got the situation where other children are anxious, and if other children are perceiving the anxiety in other children, then are they going to take that personally? Are they going to think they're going to be rejected? Are they going to be... There's all sorts of different things and different reasons why children are going to be returning to school in a dysregulated state, or entering a dysregulated state whilst they're back because things aren't how they used to be. So we've got to be really careful of those different things. And then we have Mr. Bennett's 10-point plan. It's called, you picked 10, but I'm struggling to see where the final 3 are actually any different. But we'll come to them as we go. So first one is define what you mean by good behaviour. And again, we're straight in there with, you know, re-establishing rules of the classroom, of the corridor, of the dining room, of the yard. All of these different rules that are going to be bombarded with these children the second they walk through the door. So if they've entered the building and they weren't overwhelmed before, they probably are now. If they weren't scared before, then they probably are now. And, you know, if they came in not particularly feeling in a challenging mood, well, they've just been challenged, so they probably are up for it now. You know, and we've created that ourselves by going at them straight away with hitting them with rules, with hitting them with boundaries. Let's welcome them in. Let's be a bit more positive. You know, we have got to sort of talk about all the new things and stuff, but can't we trust them enough to explain them? Can we not do them through PHSE? Can we not talk about how it's for their own safety? You know, let's empower them with that idea that they're going to do the right thing. You know, that we believe in them. You know, these things make a big difference. You know, a lot of children will respond really positive to this approach rather than being hit with a load of rules immediately. You know, and if they do get it wrong, then, you know, we can manage that later. But we really, really want to be expecting the best out of them rather than expecting the worst. Because if we're expecting failing, that's probably what will happen. The second one is the idea that good behaviour must be taught and not told. And I really agree with this. You know, this is something that I would have in my own training sessions. You know, that I argue a lot of the time that we don't do enough to teach behaviour. But teaching behaviour is much more than just modelling and explaining. And again, I think we missed the mark on this in Mr. Bennett's document, because there doesn't seem to be enough understanding of the topic to complete the point. If we're going to teach behaviour, effective teaching and learning of behaviour is through mistakes. And, you know, there's not a person in the world that's lived a life where they haven't made mistakes, and then they learn from those mistakes, and then they make better decisions going forward. Now, it's what we do after the mistake that's our learning opportunity. If we're truly teaching behaviour to children, then we'll understand what they've done, why it needs to be done differently, and how doing it differently will benefit them. If it's behaviourist in the approach, then we're just behaving for extrinsic reasons. You know, we might want that reward or to avoid that sanction or because we're scared of something. That might be great for control and you know, a little short-term benefit. But if we want things to be better in the longer term, then we've got to be in a position where we create an opportunity for the child to do that, you know, and we do that through conversations and through learning from mistakes and through reparations and restorations and things like that. So point 3 was about building routines and habits and norms. So again, I've got no issue with the premise. You know, like I say, routines are and habits are important, and you know, it's not reinventing the wheel. You know, but when it's littered with language like challenge and correct, that for me is you know, if you've got children who are coming back dysregulated for the reasons I've said, and we're challenging them all the time and correcting them all the time, then we are asking for a raise in behaviour. We need to use words like remind. Okay, we need to be positive about what we're doing again. Let's avoid threatening consequences, and let's remind them of what to do and when they've done it right and how they've done it well in the past. Okay, let's be a bit positive about this, because we're going to have children returning with really low self-esteem. And if we don't do anything in a positive way with that low self-esteem, then that low self-esteem becomes frustration, it becomes anger, and it will probably end up being aggression. And we've caused that by making that low, what was low self-esteem, even lower. Okay, we've got to start by building that self-esteem up. Otherwise, we're going to have those things coming to the fore as we go. So, point 4: don't wait for pupils to misbehave. Be proactive. Again, I got excited at this. I did. I totally agree. Scaffolding and support should be in place when we get back to routines. When we get back to this situation, but then we're back on routines again. And unfortunately, there's no actual information about what the scaffolding or support should be. You know, being proactive is absolutely the key, but it isn't the behaviour we should be looking for. We should be looking for something that comes before the behaviour. We should be looking for physical signs that the child is distressed. Are they more tense? Are they sweating? Are they fidgeting? Abnormal eye contact could be some sign something's wrong. These are the points at which we intervene, because we've got so many different strategies we've got at this point. We could distract, we could give them jobs to do, we could get them involved in a conversation about something that is interesting to them. We could change the activity. All of these things are at our disposal before we get to negative behaviour. If we wait for negative behaviour so that we can then threaten a consequence, then we've already waited for it to go too far. And that's not being proactive. That's being reactive, and that's waiting. You know, the threat of the consequence is not necessary if we don't wait for them to do something wrong. And I know it's a very personalised plan and everything that we need for the children, but it will save us so much time and effort further down the line if we can the sooner we can get these children back to where we need them to be. Making boundaries meaningful. Now we're at the real nitty gritty. Now we're at the rewards and sanctions section. We also mix in a little bit of teacher shaming with it. You know, if you're not consistent with the rewards and sanctions, then it's your fault. We must challenge, again, so that children don't break those rules. And fair play. There was a line that was dedicated to rewards as well. We mustn't forget the extrinsic value of those rewards as well. But again, we've got an opportunity now. We've got an opportunity for change, and the reliance on extrinsic rewards and sanctions. We don't need to go down that line. We've got children return to school where everything is about the feelings that they have and working with those. Why do they have them? Why are those feelings driving certain behaviours? Now, whether they are good or bad, how do they feel after they've done good or bad behaviours? We've got to investigate those things, and we've got to work for them. And in my experience, children care far more about the relationships than they do about the merits. Telling them that you're proud of them or that you're disappointed with them can be really, really, really more powerful than any merit or any reward or any sanction. But what we do have to be careful of is with that use of disappointment. We want children to feel guilty about doing something wrong. We don't need to punish for it, but we need to motivate them to fix it. We need to give them the chance to put it right. And we want them to feel guilty that they've done a bad thing. Okay? What we don't want is for them to feel ashamed, because if they feel shame, then rather than doing something bad, they are bad. And that's a dangerous place to be. And it's very difficult to get away from that once we've got a child that feels that way. We've got to show them that we're proud. We've got to show them how to be proud of themselves, you know, especially putting things right and how to rebuild that fragile self-esteem again. You know, the choices that they make need to be truly choices. You know, are they in a position where they can actually are calm enough to think and make the decisions? And when it comes to putting things right, are they calm enough to make that decision to put it right? You know, isn't that what adults do? They go away, they calm down, they think about a way to make something right, and then they come back and do that. You know, we got to give children that opportunity, especially at this stage when they're going to be making bad decisions. We've got to support them to make better ones, to put it right. I've got no issues with boundaries at all. They're vital. They're sorely lacking in many homes. You know, a lot of children are coming to school age 4. They're not ready for school because they haven't had the boundaries that they needed. I totally get that. You know, children are going to have regressed because they've gone from having boundaries in school to not having them now. But if we're only focused on the boundaries and not on what's underlying it, then we're going to have real problems coming down the line. You know, it ignores what's important, and what's important is the motive of the behaviour. You know, what has driven that behaviour? Did the child have control at the time of the behaviour? Was the right part of the brain working to actually allow a choice, or were they hijacked? Is the child behaving in a way that they are overwhelmed by their feelings that have built up over time? None of these things will get a look in if you're going down a line of you must behave this way or else you get this consequence. It doesn't, you know, it just doesn't benefit in the long run. I urge all of you to look at the work of Rachel Tomlinson. She goes by the Twitter name at Barrowford Head, and he's a head teacher at Barrowford School. And she wrote a brilliant Twitter thread about her school, which uses no rewards or sanctions. And it's a school that very much focuses on intrinsic decision making, that comes from a really safe environment, something that really should be top priority for schools post-COVID. So do check that out. Like I say, a fantastic thread. Point 6, rewrite your behaviour policy and consequences to reflect current circumstances. Yes, current circumstances, right? We're going to take into account what the children have experienced, understand where the behaviour comes from, and we're going to adjust the policy accordingly. No, we're not. We're going to add some external behaviours to the list, and then we're going to give them more severe consequences. This is the perfect exercise for how to fast-track children to exclusion. Tell them what the worst behaviour that they shouldn't be doing is, and then wonder why they do it when they are dysregulated and angry. Now, I'm not playing down the seriousness of the hygiene stuff and things like that. We need to come back. And it is something that needs to be explained and the potential implications laid out. I totally get that. But surely it's better delivered in a PHSE session than just being another strict rule to throw at the children. And I find it absolutely incredible that we haven't even returned from lockdown yet, and we're already talking about exclusion and isolation as punishment and sanctions. It baffles me. Point 7 is to train your staff first. Yeah, again, I totally agree with training staff. Train them on neuroscience, on empathy, on understanding grief and trauma. Most importantly, train them on what to expect from children coming back and how they'll be dysregulated and how best to help them. Why are we likely to be why are children like to be angry at us and display attachment-like behaviours? Because we essentially have abandoned them. These are great things that the staff should be trained on. Getting everybody in a whole school assembly to remind everybody of the rules, not so much. Point 8 is that implementation is everything. Again, we go back to talking about maintenance and reinforcement. Where have I heard that before? At least Mr. Bennett is practicing what he preaches. He's certainly reinforcing his ideas. Number 9 is to reboot your expectations clearly. So repeat those expectations constantly. Exactly the same as point 8, but in a much more formalised way. And then high expectations means high support. I'm all for high expectations. And, no problem whatsoever. But I've always preferred to get children to the point where they have enough self-belief to actually have high expectations of themselves. From a classroom control perspective, it makes my life dead easy if they behave for that reward or the fear of the sanction. But have I actually taught them anything, or have I really helped them? Probably not. What is the clarity on high support other than sort of repeating points 8 and 9? For me, high support comes from relationships I have with the pupil. That, they behave well because of how that makes me feel. And by making someone they care about feel good, in turn makes them feel better about themselves. That's what I want to see. Negative feelings drive negative behaviour, so let's replace the negative feelings. This high support isn't a formal session of going through the expectations. It's every encounter, it's every joke shared, it's every reminder that they've done something well, every time you've had their back and gone to bat for them, every time you've answered their questions and made them feel wanted. These are the interactions that build the relationship that create the high expectations. It's not about me telling them what I want from them. It's about them wanting to do what I am asking them to do. There is, fair play. There is the small print. The afterthought of we've done our 10-point plan, but it is important to acknowledge that this, may not be easy for some of the children, and some of the children may have experienced difficult things in their lockdown experience, and we want them to feel valued, and somehow all these extrinsic factors will result in their own intrinsic high expectations, although I'm not too sure how that might be. And those children that are finding things difficult should be passed on to pastoral teams and external professionals, rather than adapting the procedures in the classes to include them. Now, that might work before, and that behaviourist approach might well work before, but there's a big underestimation of just the sheer volume of children that are going to be coming back struggling to follow these strict rules and procedures that are being suggested in this document. How is a pastoral team going to cope when they are overwhelmed because they've got so many dysregulated children that are not coping, that are bouncing off other dysregulated children, and that knock-on effect around school? We can't rely on pastoral interventions when we come back. We have to have an approach from each classroom teacher to support, and that's how we get back to being ready for learning. But I'll come to that as we go. So what do I believe that we should be focusing on? Well, this kind of concludes my critique of Mr. Bennett's document. I do feel it's very dated. I don't feel it's of much use, but I absolutely think if this is the approach that schools are going to take, then we are going to be going down a really dangerous path. Hitting dysregulated children head on, trying to exert control, is likely to end in disaster. We have to do something different to that. Normal circumstances, the majority would be able to toe the line, and you'd have some stragglers that might be marginalised, but we're not going to have a few stragglers. We're going to have a lot of children because it's not normal circumstances. And we've got a lot of things to repair before we get to that point. We need the systems, absolutely, but they're at a point where they're playing second fiddle and they're just underpinning the need for relationships at this point. Now, what I've got here is a sequential approach to returning to learning. And there's nothing complicated in it, but it's got to be done in this order. And you have children at different points, and each of the children that are at different points are going to also progress at the different rates. But we've got to follow the sequence, because if we're trying to run before we walk, then we're going to be in a difficult position. So first thing we've got safety. And in terms of our safety, we don't know what the children have experienced. I've said that numerous times. They will have experienced some form of loss, and it might only be on a temporary loss of routine or friends or trusted adults, but it could be a permanent loss of a loved one and a bereavement that is going to cause all number of different feelings and problems. Our job, when they come back, is to be somebody who will listen. And that's our absolute number one priority, is to listen to what they've got to say, right? We've then got to validate what they are feeling. We don't tell them how to feel. We can't do that thing that we desire to do from a nurturing perspective, whether we're teachers, whether we're parents. We want to fix what that child is feeling, but we can't fix it. Okay, we can only validate it. We can only tell them that we understand and it's okay to feel that way. And we need to be empathetic to what it is that they are feeling and wait for it to pass. And that might be frustrating for us, and we might want to hurry that along, but we have to be there supporting those things so that that child gets to the point where they feel safe and they feel listened to. Now, when we've got them to that point where they feel safe and they feel listened to, then we work to rebuild the trust that we had before. Now, some children might understand why they were sent away, okay, and they understand that it wasn't our fault and it wasn't our choice, and they've gone home to safe environments where they've actually quite enjoyed themselves, and they come back, no problem, and your relationship is exactly where you left it. Unfortunately, that is not going to be the majority of children. A lot of children are coming back feeling abandoned by us. Now, what we have to do is we have to reassure, we've got to rebuild that relationship, and we've got to resist any sort of challenge that they throw at us. There's going to be different children reacting in different ways, and we're going to have a lot of attachment-like behaviours that we've got to overcome. There's going to be children coming back who feel like we left them and that we're inconsistent, that we might leave them again, and they're going to want to be around us all of the time. They're going to be asking silly questions. They're going to be wanting constant reassurance. They're probably going to be struggling to socially distance from us, and they're just they don't know when you're going to be available, when you're going to leave again, so they want you there all the time, and they're trying to control that situation. You can have other children who are going to feel really, really abandoned by you. They'd opened up their feelings, they'd let you in, they'd trusted you, they'd built a relationship with you, and then it was gone. And that child's going to have some serious walls up because they've let their feelings show, and it's bitten them in the bum, and so they're going to be very wary about doing that again. It's going to take time to rebuild that and get over that wall and getting that child back on track. They're likely to be quite withdrawn when they come back, and we've got to work through getting them back involved. You're also going to have children who are angry at you for leaving them, angry at you for sending them away to somewhere that wasn't safe. They are going to challenge us. They are going to test us to the max with their behaviour, and we've just got to resist and show that we aren't going to leave them again. We do care about them, and we can be trusted by them, and that can be really difficult to do sometimes. You know, our natural instinct when we're being challenged is to challenge back, and you know, but if we do that, then we're going to be it's going to delay the situation, rebuilding it. So 3 is regulation. We talked about why children are dysregulated coming back. Now we've got a situation where we've got a child that feels safe. We've got a child that is rebuilt at the trust with us. We've now got to get them to a point where they can regulate themselves better. Okay, and if they're trusting us, then they're more likely to listen to what we're saying. And when we try and put the interventions in, they're probably going to be more open to those. So we need to know what their individual re-regulation thing is, and it will vary from child to child. We as adults all have different things that we do when we need to re-regulate, whether it's going and doing some physical exercise, whether it's doing some arts and crafts, whether it's doing sensory stuff, whether it's doing whether it's just having a right good sound off and a rant to somebody. Whatever works for us as an individual, each child will have something that works for them. And we can't just decide, all right, we're going to do whole class mindfulness today, because that might be fantastic for a quarter of them, but the rest, it's has the opposite effect. So we know what their individual re-regulation is, and that's what we need to do when we're intervening. Now, it might be that child has already got to angry, and we're really struggling, and we're in survival mode, and we can't get them right. That's when we need to have that intervention ready to go, and we need the trust in order for them to listen to us and go with us in order to do that, whether that's your physical activity or whatever. Also, we want the child to be able to do their own interventions, be aware of their own regulation, and know what they need to do for themselves. And that's really important. But it might be that child has done exceptionally well in that moment of approaching crisis. Their fight, flight, freeze has said, right, we're going to run away, we're going to fight now. And they've gone, no, I'm okay, I can manage this. Now, if they've managed it, then brilliant. But they've still got all those chemicals that were released that was going to tell them to fight and flight. So they've got the cortisol knocking about the system. They've got the adrenaline going. And they're stuck in class trying to learn with all of those things going around their body all at once. That's really difficult. They're going to be irritable. They're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be fidgety. We've got to spot that and help them. You know, if they ask us, can I go and do this because I'm feeling this, then we have to say yes. And we have to direct, or we have to support what they're asking in order for them to release all that. We've got to reward them for being that child that can regulate themselves, because that's a really difficult skill for many to do. And from a learning perspective, we've got to know that if we've got a dysregulated child, even if they're being calm, even if they're in a free state, they're still not thinking. They're still too uncomfortable, too dysregulated to be able to process what's going on. So their executive functioning is not working. They're not remembering what they're being told. They're not processing the information as they should be when they're being given it. Now, we have to get that child regulated and switch on their thinking brain if we want learning, and we've got to be aware of that before we're going to get anywhere. Next, we've got to look at belonging. And you've got lots of children that are in a position where they trust the adults, but they don't trust the other children. they're struggling with the inconsistency of the other children. We've got added problems with that in that they've been away from each other for a long time. They might be thinking that they're not the friend anymore, or so when children are expecting other children to reject them, then the safest option for them is to then be the one that rejects. At least that gives them that little bit of control. So they will push the other children away. They will become withdrawn. They will lash out. They will be unpredictable. And the other children will in turn be wary of them. And we end up in a cycle of, even though they want to be friends with each other, they haven't got that trust to include each other. And we've got to rebuild that. And that might be, again, through starting off with little paired work. It might be little social skills groups. It might be playing games together. Whatever we do, we've got to rebuild that belonging, because we need the children in a position where they aren't fearing the rejection of each other. Because if a child is fearing rejection of the peers, then if they get something wrong, they'll get laughed at. People think they're stupid. And that fear of rejection can drive all of that work avoidance that can become that can just become the norm, and they get more skilled at it, they fall further behind, and it becomes a real difficulty for them. So if we remove the fear, then we haven't got a situation where the child is worried about what the other children think. They're calm enough to think about what they're going to be doing. They're safe. Everything's in place for that child to make themselves vulnerable and show the courage in their learning. Now, we ask children to put themselves out there all of the time, answer questions they don't know the answer to, do tests, do all sorts of things that require a big amount of courage. And some children will just be too scared. You'll have the children who are in that freeze zone. They won't put the hand up. They won't answer the question. They'll just be silent until you go on to the next one. They're constantly hiding and stuff. We want bravery. We've got to put in the building blocks. Anybody who's done Thrive, it's a similar principle. We cannot run before we walk. If we're going in straight away and asking them to be vulnerable with the learning, then we're struggling. If we're going in and we're hitting a child with a load of rules and a load of things like that, when we're not regulated, they're going to fight back against it. If we haven't got their trust and we're telling them to do stuff, they're not going to listen to us. We have to go through this path, and we have to do it in this sequence. Otherwise, we're not going to be effective in getting them back to where we were before. And we might even get them beyond where they were before. This might be an opportunity for some children to really sort of make good progress because of a different approach to their learning. Now, I know in this circumstance it's not a time to be negative. I know that, and I try not to be. I'm trying to be positive, but nothing about the rebooting behaviour after lockdown gives me anything to feel positive about. But if you're not sure of what I'm saying and this sequential approach, there are a load of really good documents out there. Okay, the recovery curriculum by Barry Carpenter is a fantastic read. The reflective tool for school leaders leaving lockdown by 5 Ways Devon is worth a look, and the new Restore Our Schools document. And I know Paul Dix has had some involvement in that. They are well worth a look, but we've got to understand where the feelings are coming from, and we've got to have the empathy to validate the feelings. That's the path that schools must take if we are going to return to where we were. So thanks for listening.